Well, he wisely took it off the table. I think now phase two exists only as a sort of an abstract concept, a rhetorical point, but he said he's basically saying nothing at all is going to happen regarding phase two this year. But after the election, we'll get back into it.
Why is that, do you think?
Well, because I think that he's learned through this course of phase one that involves a lot of friction and very little benefit, and that China has very little appetite for moving, and they're especially not going to move when they're being hectored by him. So I think you've got that trade relationship sort of at a standstill. So he's better off pushing it back.
What does phase two look like? Because as we were discussing in the last hour of the show, phase one was pretty uninspiring. There wasn't a whole lot in it. Yes, it's centered around agriculture, but the key issues where these two sides are so bitterly divided were basically untouched.
I think China is trying to be minimalist in its responsiveness. It has no interest in macroeconomic reform. It can do a little bit of market opening. It can do a little bit of tariff reduction. But in general, I think it will not be very fruitful for the United States, this whole phase two. He's ballyhooed as an enormous game changer. But as you point out, for phase one, it's unclear what we're going to get. Mutual tariff reductions, but these are tariffs that Trump himself put into place.
Right. So what would phase two then, if, of course, we see negotiations get underway, what would a phase two deal look like? Would it be would it be inclusive of some of those issues around tech, IP, or are those just too difficult to
No, look,
cross?
I think you're going to see, first of all, it won't start until after the election, so it doesn't start until 2021. Second of all, the negotiations will go on for a good year. So the point is they're playing a bit of a delaying game. I'm saying I wouldn't put any money on reaping a great harvest out of phase two, but I think you will see some improvements in tariff structure, some more market openings. Look, China's been making marginal improvements in its trade regime pretty consistently since it joined the WTO 20, 30 years now. So I think you'll see that pattern continue, but I'm not looking for a game changer in their trade regime.
Of course, if we're now seeing phase two pushed out until after the election, we might not even be talking about a phase two deal to begin with then. What do you think the chances are that President Trump won't secure a second term?
Right now, the two big drivers of his reelection are the economy and who the Democratic nominee is. Most professionals say the economy will continue to perform this year, that he's going to go into a favorable kind of environment. So that leaves the big variables, who's the Democratic nominee. And I think there's one or two who could be very competitive, Joe Biden being probably the strongest. There'll be a few that'll be very, very tough. They're so ideological, I think they have trouble capturing that base. But I'll tell you that Trump remains somewhat vulnerable. His unpopularity number is still very high, Matthew. So if Democrats can conjure up some sort of sellable candidate, he's going to have a real horse race.
Apart from Joe Biden, who's another sellable candidate? Is it, I think last time you were on the show, we were chatting about the fact that Mike Bloomberg had just essentially thrown his hat into the ring.
Bloomberg could be competitive in general, but it's hard to see the path to the nomination for him because he's a little bit too centrist for the party. He has a Republican pedigree. He's a wealthy, I mean, he doesn't quite fit the party rank and file. Klobuchar is a bit of a dark horse who's probably number 5 on the list, but he's also centrist and sellable. So, but I think Sanders and Warren are too ideological to really go the difference.
That was going to be my next question. Are the Democrats essentially shooting themselves in the foot by putting so much behind these potential candidates like Elizabeth Warren and like Bernie Sanders? Because we've seen in politics globally that if you have people that are too ideologically away from the center, whether it be on the left or the right, that voters really aren't going to pay that much attention to them.
I think this is a huge risk for the Democrats that it's almost like what the Labour Party did in UK with Jeremy Corbyn, that Boris Johnson has his share of problems, but Corbyn had many more problems. So there's a huge risk that I think either Sanders or Elizabeth Warren would represent an enormous problem for the Democrats.
What about on the impeachment side of things? That appears to have died down a little bit in terms of the rhetoric coming out surrounding impeachment. We, of course, know that we are still awaiting a Senate timetable on that. Will that be an election issue, do you think, in 2020? Of course, it remains to be seen whether or not we will see the president removed from office, and that's looking unlikely given the passage through the Senate.
I think it's faded significantly as an issue. I think Pelosi did a reasonably good job of getting this through the House, but she never got national traction. She never excited the general public. And Trump did a very good job of defending his position. So I don't think it goes anywhere in the Senate. And she seems to be, I can't understand, Matthew, what she's doing now with this current tactic of saying she's going to hold off on transmitting it to the Senate till she's satisfied, because I think she's sort of playing into the Republicans' hands with that move.
Hey everybody, it's Hadley Gamble from our new CNBC Middle East Bureau in Abu Dhabi. Thanks for stopping by. Now to watch more, you can try one of the videos that just popped up on your screen. And don't forget to subscribe.